Hey loves, it's Britt, and in this video I'm going to talk about what it means to have Venus and Mars in conjunct or quincunx in synastry, so in your relationship. So this one is probably a bit less awkward than the video I just talked about. I just did Sun in conjunct to Mars in synastry. So Venus and Mars in conjunct in synastry still creates kind of a sexual buzz or attraction. Now, the attraction is also coinciding with this feeling, specifically more from Venus, that they, with their love energy or their sexual energy, they may not be exactly what it is that Mars is looking for. Now, the reason that I'm saying that Venus is the one that notices this more is because Venus is a more feminine and receptive energy. Venus is more how we receive others' energy, and Mars is more how we give it. Okay, so Mars is less concerned with this fact that Venus may be different than them because, generally speaking, unless Mars is in a super passive sign, Mars is still, because it's Venus touching Mars, and anyway, Mars is still gonna feel horny or attracted to Venus and will probably just ignore the fact that maybe they're different, at least for the night or for the initial pursuing of Venus, because Venus Mars aspects, all aspects, are very sexually attractive, very physically, romantically attractive. So, what can end up happening with this aspect though is that Venus can feel like their heart or their love or the way that they express themselves is yeah, just not what Mars needs. And then Venus can also feel like the way that Mars expresses themselves and the way that Mars physically goes after them is maybe a bit almost like disturbing is the wrong word, but like they can definitely feel not pleasurable feelings when Mars is sexually going after them. But you have to look at everything. Like, so I've had this on a double whammy before, um, where I had the trine on one hand. So Mars was trine to my Venus, and then his Venus was in conjunct to my Mars, and we actually had Mars conjunct Mars. And we had amazing physical sexual compatibility. But in a relationship, it never happened. And it was probably on my part why it never happened. So it doesn't mean that a sexual relationship is doomed with this aspect, but it can mean that there's something about the connection where there's just an incompatibility, right? And the thing with the inconjunct aspect is it's not as easily resolved as the square or the opposite. Well, the square isn't really resolved, it's just a constant butting of heads, which sometimes people like more than the awkwardness of the inconjunct. Because the inconjunct aspect is so awkward that it can have you feeling like, in order to successfully be in this relationship, you are going to have to give up too much of yourself or too much of what you love. So the Venus person can end up feeling like they're just never going to be enough for the Mars person's demands. Or it can be vice versa. The Mars person can feel like, their energy and the way they assert themselves, the way they are sexually, is just never going to be enough for the Venus person. Or there can be, it's really interesting, there can be attraction with a simultaneous ick for that person when we have this inconjunct. So there can be insecurity brought up by this inconjunct. I would probably say the square too could create insecurity a bit, but out of, like, because Venus Mars is usually so comfy cozy and actually makes you feel good, and more expressed, the inconjunct kind of can do the opposite, where one person, yeah, does feel like, this relationship, yeah, I'm going to give up too much of what I want. Venus person can feel like I'm going to give up too much of what I want. And Mars person can feel like Venus is just going to hold me back, or Venus's wants and Venus's demands, and the way that Venus is socially is kind of an ick for me. And you can even feel like quite early on, like the way that Venus is flirting or the way that Mars is flirting is kind of unattractive to you. Like it's like it if you have it on the double whammy and like the other side is good, then you might not feel this. But if you just have this aspect going one way, there can be this like attraction, but simultaneously knowing that, like, oh, this person is not my type, or I'm not this person's type. And like, it's interesting because you'll know that, but then at the same time, because the inconjunct is not a super outward aspect, it's not like you're not going to externalize this, you're not necessarily going to communicate this. It's just going to be this subtle undercurrent of like, oh, I'm really attracted to this person, but I know I'm not their type, or I know that, what I want, because Venus and Mars can show a lot of what we want and how we're going to go after it. Specifically, Mars is how we're going to go after it. We can just know that, like, that's not going to line up, right? But if we have other good contacts, this isn't a deal breaker. This isn't as awkward as others because Venus is more feminine. Venus is more going to go along with it, even if they know there's an incompatibility, which is different when we've got two masculine energy planets showing up in an inconjunct where nobody really wants to budge. But in this case, Venus will let Mars be themselves. They're not going to stop Mars from acting on their Mars, but at the same time with a subtle knowing of like, oh, maybe I just don't really find pleasure in the way that Mars acts or something, So this can work if you've got other good stuff going on, but it can lead to, awkwardness and feeling of like, this relationship will never give me what I want. Okay, so I'd love to know your experience of this aspect. Was it like this? Was it not like this? Let me know in the comments, and thanks for the requests. Keep them coming. Thanks, you guys. Bye.